Hello, fiends, friends, and familiars. This is Matt Orozco from Macabre Daily here, and I'm excited because today I'm joined by Chris Condon, who is a celebrated comic book writer known for his gripping narratives and deep character work. He's done work for Image Comics as well as written for places like DC, Marvel, Aftershock, and of course Oni Press, which is what we're here to talk about today. And from Oni Press, we have Hunter Gorinson, who's the president and publisher at Oni. He's no stranger to the world of comics, having previously served as an executive at Boom Studios. But you're also responsible for growing the brand of Oni Press, bringing exciting new voices, reviving legacy imprints like EC Comics, and providing captivating stories to readers of all ages. So today, we're here to talk about the upcoming series High Strangeness in collaboration with SpectreVision. So again, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me.
Of course. Thank you.
So much, Matt. Super
That's a
stuff.
pleasure. Well, big fan of your comics. I've News of the Fallout was one of the most interesting reads I've had this year, Chris. And I was at my local comic shop about a week ago for a Matt Bohr signing, and I picked up the new Cruel Universe and the Catacomb of Torment. So I'm all in on both of the work you all are doing. But I'm curious to know about how this partnership with Oni Press, SpectreVision, and yourself, Chris, came to be.
Well, I mean, Hunter is the reason for the season, you know. He's the one who he reaches out to me and he's like, "Hey, I got this crazy idea. Do you maybe want to, take a crack at it?" And I usually say, "Yeah," immediately because we're the same kind of madmen. But he had reached out to me. Like, I mean, this starts when he first asked me to take a crack at Night People, the adaptation of Barry Gifford's novel, which seems like a crazy idea, but we did it,
You did
and
it.
I think it came out great. But he asked me if I was interested in co-writing the first issue of High Strangeness with Daniel Noah, who was one of the co-founders of SpectreVision. I was very aware of who Daniel Noah was, and especially SpectreVision. I had worked for Joe Dante for a number of years, and I remember when they did a live read for The Man with Kaleidoscope Eyes, is his great unmade Roger Corman biopic, in which Roger Corman takes acid. Um,
It's worth the price of
uh,
admission alone, to be honest.
but yeah, I mean, he kind of had me like from the start. I mean, you say SpectreVision, I'm in. You say High Strangeness, I'm in. You say that we're talking about UFOs and Men in Black, I'm even more in. So it was just kind of a one, another link in this, great, collaboration that we're still in the process of, I mean, we're talking about books that are going forward, but this was just another book that he offered me, and I was so excited by the subject matter and the people involved in it. Bess Polaris is the editor on this, and she's fantastic, and yeah, I'm just fortunate to be here, I suppose.
Chris, and then Hunter, what do you have to say about kind of where did this crazy idea come from?
Very well said, Chris. And Chris is one of my favorite people to call with crazy ideas on the phone. He always picks up, which I appreciate. Uh, so way back when I started as publisher at Oni, it was like we were trying to figure out. We had a lot of irons in the fire about crazy ideas we could do. Night People was one of those. EC was one of those. I think Chris was, I think, literally the first person outside the company who I told about that idea in early 2023. And one of those was occasionally too a cool thing about being a publisher of comic book companies. You sometimes have mutual friends or whatever. We're like, there's somebody cool you should meet. I think you guys would get along. I don't know what the like idea is, but like just have a conversation and see. So that person was Daniel Noah, who's Elijah Wood's producing partner at SpectreVision and one of the co-founders of the company, a very accomplished writer, producer, director in his own right. And so I happened to be in LA on a business trip. I do not live there. I went to go meet Daniel at the SpectreVision offices, and they have these beautiful, cool, pretty laid back offices. And in it, he had a wall of books. And so, and he's like, "I'm gonna go get coffee or whatever." And I start uh, uh, very conspicuously poking around in Daniel Noah's book collection, and come to realize that we have the exact same taste in like esoterica, in like paranormal and supernatural stuff. And so we sat down. We don't really know what this conversation is going to be about, other than that SpectreVision might do comics at some point. We don't know. And we start talking about John Keel and Jacques Vallée, and Daniel said to me at one point, like, so are you like into this? And I said, I'm really into this. And he said, fuck yeah, me too. You know what I
Step
mean?
Brothers moment, and then we just become best friends.
Become best friends. So from there, High Strangeness was born. And Daniel has really led the charge on kind of architecting out what the span of this should be. He's a fascinating character. He's had many very well documented paranormal experiences of his own. You can go listen to those stories that he's told on podcasts like Spooked and Euphomet, SpectreVision Radio Live, etc. But began his life as a hardcore dyed-in-the-wool skeptic and is now a believer in virtually every stripe of paranormal phenomenon, which obviously informs his work as well. So we saw this project as like it's very unique. It's very unique in many ways, but also a chance to do something really cool and experimental and bring great folks like Chris into the fold to help tell these stories who share a passion for this kind of genre as well.
And you have rotating kind of writers and illustrators coming in for these. So I think that also adds a kind of level of diversity alongside the anthology style format of different stories, but also different ways of articulating that story and kind of and visualizing it. Um, and you know, you mentioned something about Daniel Noah's journey from becoming a absolute skeptic to a true believer. I'm curious about your both, where you both stand on these. What's your kind of relationship to the paranormal and extraterrestrial, the things we don't know? Where would you place yourselves on the spectrum of true believer and complete skeptic?
Chris, you should go first, buddy. You'll be
Well,
interview.
I'm the sort of person who I'm utterly fascinated with the paranormal, with um, the possibility of life elsewhere. These are things that I've always been fascinated with, and it kind of started when I was a kid. My mom had on the coffee table always this book. It was like a blue hardcover book. It was Mysteries of the Unexplained, I think it's the title. It was a Reader's Digest like hardcover so I was like reading about like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and banshees and like all these like crazy things when I was a kid and envisioning these things and wondering what they were and like whether they were real or not. And so I've always been very interested in trying to experience these things for myself. Um, I don't know if I would call myself a believer. I think I would say I'm a skeptic, but I think I'm also of the mind like I think I'm very much a Fox Mulder. I want to believe, you know. Uh, I've experienced some things that are strange and I can't explain them, but I still find myself unable to fully, take that leap and say that it was definitively a thing, you know. I mean, I find it hard for myself to do that. I don't know why, but let's say that I want to believe. I'll leave it at that.
You're a classic Mulder. You're a classic Mulder content.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I think that life is like inherently mysterious and somewhat mystical. And like as much as the rational part of our existence has become over the course of the past couple hundred years the center of our being, and I believe science is real and that things that are demonstrably exist. You know what I mean? But that there's a dimension, no pun intended, of human experience that can't quite be quantified, and that something is happening here. We may not have the exact vocabulary or words to describe it, and it may be very, very rare, and it may only happen to some of us some of the times, but that doesn't mean that it can't have a profound impact on that concrete reality in some way when it does happen. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure believer is the way I would couch it. I think a lot of this stuff is potentially happening in our heads or has something to do with the way that we perceive reality or whatever reality is or whatever the hardware we have in our bodies to process certain elements of reality. Maybe this stuff is coming through the gaps in that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
really a
Uh,
question.
that,
Yeah.
that's really interesting, and I mean, I think that that's kind of hitting something that I didn't phrase so well. But there's a lot of things out there that I can't explain, and I know that I can't explain them, and I don't try to. And I guess maybe that makes me somebody who, maybe I'm a believer. I don't know. Or, I don't know. But I always think back on this. It's actually quantum physics, but it was observation changes reality. And that's a wild concept, and that's science. So if that's true, then why can't some of these other things be true? And those are the things that I keep hitting on when I think about, subject matter. I mean, whether you're talking about, ghosts or UFOs or whatever the subject matter is. I mean, these things are always, well, why can't it? Or why couldn't it? You know? Um, that's always something that I'm always asking myself and something that I'm always trying to explore.
And we have, I think, an innate need to understand because of how our cognition works, right? Like we're extremely intelligent creatures, but that also kind of lends us into these twisted cycles of trying to figure everything out. And there is an element of like, your perception is your reality. So if you experience something a certain way, religion's probably maybe the best example, right? If you believe in religion, then you believe in sort of an ultimate higher being above people, something you worship. Um, and that guides everything you do. You can explain almost everything that happens to that one thing, and that's your perception, your reality. Almost like how Steve Jobs created that around his environment to some extent, although not as much in a positive way, more kind of in a self-serving way. Um, but Chris, as I mentioned earlier, your recent work in News from the Fallout, it's really focusing on how average people experience abnormal events. In this case, a nuclear disaster that causes people to turn into ravaging creature zombies, right? Why is it important to kind of shift the focus away from things that are more kind of superhuman, hero-esque, to if you will, to something that's more pedestrian? And how does that serve the purpose of high strangeness?
I thought that there was a lot to pull from the life of John Keel. So that was obviously that was an inspiration for Daniel and our character that we're dealing with in the first issue, who's named Harry Keene, and he's very similar to him in a lot of ways. I mean, he's different as well as a fictional character, but I thought there was a lot to pull from the and I mean, he might be pedestrian in a way, but I also think that he's a very, he's an observer, and I think that that's something, whereas he's an observer, whereas like in News from the Fallout, those people are experiencing something in the moment, right? So he's what our character is out there doing is he's found out, he's working for this magazine, Luminary magazine in Chicago, and he gets a gig, and so he's investigating this thing that happened to try to find out the truth behind it, and you know there's a different in there, but I think that you're still trying to break open the same nut. Like you're still trying to find the same things, whether you're doing it in a diner in Southern Nevada or whether you're doing it in Chicago and Indiana, like we are in High Strangeness. I mean, I think that they're kind of getting at the same thing, but in different ways. And I don't ever try to tell the same story twice if I can avoid it, at least not intentionally. And I love playing with different characters, different kinds of people. So for me, it's really as a writer, as a creator, it's very freeing to get to write different kinds of stories with different kinds of characters and different avenues of story as well. And a lot of that came from Daniel. I mean, Daniel had what I was working from was an outline that Daniel had written initially. So the way that we collaborated on this, because he is a co-writer, what we ended up doing was he wrote the outline, which kind of had the sketch of what we would do, set pieces, things like that. And then I just expanded them and fleshed them out and gave them life, and then handed the script back to him and said, "Okay, here's how you write a comic script, and here's my thing, and revise it as however you want." So he went at it and did his revisions on my work, and then we went back and forth from there. So it's really interesting to see what parts of me come through and what parts of him come through. Because at the end of the day, I mean, this is a collaboration, and I would never want to just throw my name on this as the stamp. This is very much Daniel's story. I wanted it to be true to Daniel's ideas of what he wanted it to be. But it's at the same time, I do think that people will get hints of me in there. You know, whatever that means to you.
I
I
mean,
don't know.
it's an interesting kind of point around the collaboration process because I think we often don't know like how these often start and what they look like in practice. So the idea that it starts with an outline and then you kind of fill in the blanks, so to speak, and then there's a refinement that goes through. I mean, we all know about the editing process, but I think it's interesting to see how much involvement Daniel has in the final product so that it doesn't feel like you know, a ghost written kind of exercise where Daniel giving like a story, but you're really putting in 100, 70% of the work. And for Hunter, I read in an interview with you from a while back that you get a lot of pitches about civil wars that feature zombies and vampire or werewolves and vampires fighting each other in Gettysburg. Um, and they're often missing a very kind of universal human experience. Um, how does that kind of, and focus on universal human experience kind of explain what we'll see in not just this first issue of High Strangeness, but the continuing issues from it afterwards?
Yes, shots fired. I perhaps too directly publicly told that is not a real pitch, but it is very similar to I would describe as the kind of like uh, uh, not great comic book pitch that you are afforded 98% of the time when you're not working with the Chris Condons and Christopher Campbells of the world, which is the joke which is unfortunately inspired by reality, is that like 98% of indie comic book pitches are like, hey, Oni Press, I have the story for you. Not going to be able to say no to this one. This is perfect for you guys. 1864, Gettysburg. Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant meet head to head on the battlefield. But Ulysses S. Grant, werewolf. Robert E. Lee, vampire. And it goes from there. Are you in or are you out? And it's like, tough. Because like that's just I'm trying to think of a non-derogatory way to say this.
It's like the
That's
first 5 pages of a story.
movie stuff. You know what I mean? Like that's the easy part. The hard part, and yeah, there's actually a world in which that story could be interesting. As Chris knows, like the harder part about telling genre stories and stuff in this vein is like excavating the theme out of it. What is your story actually about, and what is the universal human experience happening behind the robot stranded on the vampire planet? You know what I mean? And that is where the magic happens in comic book storytelling. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So, apologies for retelling that entire thing, and that's hilarious that you found that. Matt, I did not answer your question. What was the kernel of what you were asking? How does that apply to High Strangeness?
Yeah, so how does that kind of persistent focus on the universal human experience apply to this first issue, but also the ones to come after it?
So something that me and Daniel, and I think this has come up in me and Chris's conversations as well, have found ourselves grappling with as this project came together, is like the world is getting weirder and weirder and weirder in lots of ways. Some of them good, many of them bad. And like part of that has been this manifestation of these high strangeness phenomena, right? So like 50 years ago, at the period when this book begins in 1967, this would have been like fringe, laughable stuff. And like, how to say UFOs are fringe or something that would cause you to be laughed at is actually pretty far-fetched. We have congressional hearings about them. They're practically in the headlines every day in some capacity. There's all sorts of scientific investigations being done, whether it's in mainstream science or at the fringes of it, into whether or not these things could be they're separate, distinct things, or if they all could be manifestations or aspects of one singular phenomenon that we perhaps don't understand. There was and I hope I'm not misquoting this, there was a actual scientific paper that I believe was circulated within the past year that was like, maybe there's plasma-based life forms that live in the stratosphere and eat electromagnetism. And could that explain UFO sightings and things like that. And that's weird and crazy. And like, so the subject matter of this, like, as far flung and as weird and disturbing as things like Men in Black or UFOs or remote viewing and stuff like that is, this stuff is bleeding into our lives in some kind of way that like uh seems pronounced. And neither of you are shaking your head, so I can only assume that you 100% agree with everything I'm saying.
I mean, I can speak from my perspective that I do think that the world is getting weirder. I think a lot of it has to do with how much access to information we have and how much easier it is to self-serve our interests, for better or for worse, right? We can now create echo chambers. We don't have to acknowledge fact or reality. We can just exist in a world of, lies that
Mhm.
serve our own selfish desire to feel something. But I think there is, the fact that it's being taken. I mean, I grew up at a time when I read Communion and it changed my life. I was like, what the hell is this book? And then I saw Fire in the Sky and it scared the shit out of me. And I'm like, okay. But this was in the early 90s when, even still talking about those things, you were still considered kind of a niche topic. It wasn't something that in the mainstream was being taken with any sort of credibility. And I think that there's almost a validation that's going on as regards to, the strange kids, right? It's like, oh, maybe they were onto something. Um,
Something's happening, like might not be like little men in a saucer from Venus or whatever, but like something's happening. It could be psychological, it could be some manifestation of like Jungian archetypes, it could be full on interdimensional crossover, whatever. Like it could be a bazillion different things, but it is like bleeding into our everyday lived experience in some way. Like, and it doesn't seem radical to say that at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there was like just the other day, I mean, literally up to today, there was a conspiracy theory that everybody was talking about was the president's dead, right? This was just because no,
I just got cut off. So I lost you at
it's
the
okay.
conspiracy
I was
was the
talking about
president.
something they don't want me to talk about.
No, you
They
no,
don't
this
want
is a
they don't talk about it, Chris.
yeah, but we want you to talk about it. They don't matter. So I lost you at there was the rumor about the president being dead over the weekend.
Yeah. But the thing that's crazy to me is just that we live in this world where conspiracy theories, um, unreality has become our reality. And I mean that's a large reason why we're experiencing what we're experiencing today. And I mean reality is becoming unglued, And how do people exist in that world? How do people exist in that universe when nothing is set in stone? It's just anything is anything that you say can become your reality, and it's insane. It's an insane thing to think about. Um, but that's our world. That's what we're living through. And so yeah, it's we're living through strange times. I don't know, what it's going to look like on the other end. I imagine it will be very interesting.
It's going to be
And also
scarier before it gets better, I think.
I probably.
there's the classic began with Robert Anton Wilson, who wrote the Illuminatus trilogy, and I think was kind of like adopted by Alan Moore. But essentially, the theory that conspiracy theories are a natural reaction of the human mind to try and place order on the chaos of life, and that it's
Hmm.
actually scarier to realize that life is just pure chaos. So you must invent the secret cabal of the Illuminati who are pulling the strings behind the scenes, because that at least gives you a sense of order and control versus what reality really is, which is fully unsheathed, whirling chaos from which there is no escape. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Which is
And we're
fascinating.
definitely, yes, which we're dealing with, a lot of chaos at the moment and like guardrails coming off. And maybe all of this is partially a reaction to that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think keep thinking back to 2016, the term alternative facts and how much that changed the way that we view everything. And how it's interesting you mentioned that conspiracies being kind of the reason to explain chaos. Because it's funny, the irony of that is that most of those conspiracy theories are more ridiculous than the things that they're trying to explain. So, if you follow kind of like the QAnon thought process of how things are going. There's all kinds of it's like Scientology meets, the West Wing in to some extent, and it's really out there stuff, but I think it provides a sense of calm, albeit probably harmful calm, to certain groups of folks. And it's interesting to see how you all were going to explore this across these issues, because it's not just going to be about aliens. This will be the first one, Men in Black, but other phenomena you could be focused on going forward. And you think about this debut issue. I think my last
Hmm.
question for you both is, what's one thing that you're most excited about folks reading or seeing in this first issue of High Strangeness?
Hmm. First and foremost, the awesome.
Um, the,
Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say the artwork by Dave Chisholm. That's if you were, go ahead.
I was first and foremost the awesome artwork of Dave Chisholm, who won a Ringo Award last year for his work on Z2's Miles Davis and the Search for Sound. Recently did a book for us at Oni called Plague House that's absolutely dazzling. And he has brought, like, part of the weirdness of the Men in Black that we're trying to capture with this book is their non-humanness, even though they appear in human clothes and guise. And, like, he's able to capture that uncanniness. So, and also just check out the fucking. Sorry, I probably
No,
should
yeah, you could curse. It's all fair game.
check out the motherfucking page layouts in this book because he did a terrific job. Like, just looks beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of reiterate what Hunter was just saying, I mean, it really is. I mean, he is on another level. As a cartoonist. I mean, he's the way that he lays out a page. It's he's obviously I believe he's a doctor of music. If and he writes a lot of the books that he's done. I mean, they're about music, and you feel that and how he lays out a page. In particular, there's some pages that end up closing out the book that sort of become this, they have this wonderful rhythm to them. That I mean, it's, you don't see that every day in comics, you don't necessarily need that in comics, but in this in particular, there is a rhythm set in motion that he just latched onto, and it becomes music. And I intentionally at times did, include certain things like you'll see in the comic, there's um, typewriter clacking, and railway, the wheels of a train going on the railroad tracks clacking, things like that. The rhythm becomes a part of the story, and bringing us in different locations and things like that. And I set those things up in a way because I knew Dave would catch on to them because he has that eye for musicality, um, in a silent, medium like comics. And he's fantastic. He really is just truly fantastic. The thing that I can't wait for people to see are the more mind-bendy sequences. But yeah, what Hunter was saying about the Men in Black. I mean, that stuff was so fun to get to see. Because I mean, if you read something like the Mothman Prophecies, where you know John Keel is describing these otherworldly people that just make no sense. There's things that we pulled directly from there that I in particular wanted. There's a shot of a foot at one point, and we see a wire just running from down the pant leg into the shoe, and you're like, what is that wire doing? You don't know, but
Where's it
it's
going?
doing something. And like that, those are the kind of details that we wanted to bring to the book, and Dave just knocked it out of the park. And I'm just so excited for people to see it, and just I think this is going to be a book that people are going to read again and again and again because there are a lot of details in there. And I know that Daniel wanted to lay stuff in there that will come back in later issues. So there's a lot of detail that will pay off, um, you know, repeated readings. Put it that way.
Yeah, we should note that even though the 5 issues will functionally function as standalone issues, issue 5, which is by Christian Warden, will also feature some additional art by Dave returning. Will kind of tie all of this up in a particularly mind-bending fashion. So I'm very excited for that.
Very cool. I mean, I think the limited series approach is such an interesting way to go about it to capture an initial audience, and especially if you can bring it all together, it's not like there's opportunity to expand it even further if it does well. So it's a reminder to everyone that's watching this to make sure you pick up a copy. There's different variant covers by different artists you can get. It comes out October 8th. You can get it at your favorite local retailer. You can also pre-order it online. And gentlemen, I just want to say thank you to you both for taking the time to talk about High Strangeness. Really excited to read the book once it's available, and looking forward to everything else you continue to do from both your angles because huge fans over at Macabre Daily. So thanks for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.